Okay, so hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Full Global. This is where we connect with global first entrepreneurs and remote work experts from all around the world. Our guest today is Bryan Murphy, Chief Executive Officer at Smartling. Bryan, thanks for joining us today.
Great. Thanks, and glad to be here.
Yeah, Bryan, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. And to kick things off, could you please share a bit about your journey that led you to become like a deeply involved in the world of translation and AI?
Sure. Yeah, I got involved with Smartling just about 3 years ago. I came in with our financial sponsor, Battery Ventures, which is a large private equity firm that specializes in software companies, and we had this thesis around translation localization. Once again, Battery invests in all manners of software companies all around the world. Translation localization is an important part of that, or important part of those companies. And we felt like when we looked at translation localization, it's a $50 billion global market that's largely services oriented. And we felt that software, machine learning, and now ultimately Gen AI could have a big impact in terms of improving the quality, cost, and speed of translation, which we're all interested in doing. And so that's what really got us into the space. We looked around a few different companies, and we landed on Smartling. We really liked the work that Smartling had done there. It's a cloud-native, multi-tenant solution with a real expertise in machine learning and neural machine translation as a foundation. And so we've taken that and really productized a lot of the translation effort behind it. And as a result, we're really leading the industry now in providing extremely cost-effective AI translation.
And that's awesome, Bryan. I know that you worked with many international organizations before, like dealing with their websites, apps, and various like I guess materials in multiple languages, right? So you and your teams probably face many challenges in localizing content for specific, I guess, regions, countries. So, given that background, could you maybe share how has your previous experience, influenced Smartlink's like a direction in translation, AI, localization? Can you talk more about this part?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been a consumer of translation and localization for over 20 years, right? So all of my e-commerce companies, all of my software companies, we've always translated and localized our applications, our websites, our marketing materials, et cetera, et cetera. And it's always been a pain, right? It's just always a pain. You're emailing back and forth. It's expensive. It's slow. We might do it once or twice a year kind of thing because of all of that sort of cost and heartache. And I was shocked to learn when we first got introduced to this space that there were companies like Smartling that could automate 99.9% of all that, bring down the cost 60 plus percent, improve speed to market 10, 20 times, right? And so that's when I got really excited. So I have always approached being the CEO of Smartling as a customer, right? And which is one of the things I like to do anyways. And so to me, I got really excited about what Smartling's capabilities are, and we're super excited about making more companies aware of that. There are companies like Smartling that can do all that automation, do all the dynamic workflow, that can do the
Hmm.
machine translation and AI translation for a fraction of the cost. And so that's really
Hmm.
been the fun part of this job for me.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, this translation localization is really a kind of tough market. There are a bunch of competitive competitors, right? It's a very competitive market, and with a number of like strong competitors out there. Can you talk about how SmartLink differentiates itself in this like fast-changing language tech and language AI ecosystem?
Sure. So there are, to your point, there's a handful of tech companies, and there's a handful of translation companies, but there's very few companies that do both. And really, at the end of the day, that's what our customers want. They want their websites, their marketing collateral, their customer experiences, their products multilingual. They want, like, so if you're Apple or Disney or Tesla or IBM, which customers of ours, you just want that job done. And so I think that's really one of the things that separates us it makes us really attractive as a solution, because not only are we able to provide the translation management platform to help manage all of that translation and do the automation, the integration into their existing tech stack, but then we also do the translation itself, which is once again fit for purpose. So we're able to offer neural machine translation with extremely high quality for a fraction of a penny per word, all the way to AI translation where it's perfect human quality translation, but for a fraction of the price of traditional translation. So I think our customers really appreciate the fact that we're able to provide a turnkey solution for them.
Mhm. And in one of your previous interviews, you mentioned a significant improvement in translator productivity by almost a 3 times in the last 18 months. I guess that's what you mentioned there. So how do you see the role of human language experts? How do you see this role evolving within the next maybe 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, significantly. So in the past, the traditional translator could maybe do 2,000 words a day, sort of translation. We've been able to triple and quadruple that with sites on significantly more productivity than that. And the way we're able to do that is by combining, once again, neural machine translation hub technology, where we're pairing multiple neural machine translation engines together along with machine learning to create the highest quality output. And then coupling that with large language models or Gen AI to sort of perfect that translation, so that by the time the translator actually sees that the content that's coming to them to be translated, the vast majority of the work is already done. And then their job is essentially to manage the machine, right? That translation machine, and to leverage their expertise in language pairs or content in a way to make that translation perfect. So for me, and we've talked with a lot of translators, I think they very much appreciate this. I mean, if you think about it, there's a daily grind of having to translate thousands of words per day. Really what we're doing is we're taking a lot of the sort of the drudgery work out of it and allowing them to focus on higher value tasks. And so I think that the translator of the future is going to have obviously expertise in their language pairs and content, but they're also going to become AI operators. And I think that's really the distinguishing factor. So those folks that learn how to run the machine, to manage the technology, right, and to knows how to use AI are going to be incredibly valuable.
I always tell my son that learning a foreign languages is one of the keys to success, right? But just listening to you with that ChatGPT, with other AI technologies advancing this area, do you think it still makes sense to focus so much on this, or maybe in 2 3 years our phone will translate everything instantly, so we won't even notice that we're speaking different languages?
Yeah, listen, I think that ultimately, business is done between people and people that have trusted relationships. And I think that language, obviously, I think language is the primary driver of creating those trusted relationships. So having done business all around the world, the ability to speak a foreign language, the ability to speak, whether it's English, if that's not your native language, or the ability to speak Japanese or Spanish or French or German when you're doing business with folks in those countries, goes a long way to building that trust and building those relationships. So I think that that's going to be important. I think from a digital perspective, though, we've got a job to do, right? So we've got to consume large quantities of content, and so we know that customers vastly prefer to read content in their own language, right? So even though maybe someone Ukrainian can speak English and can read English, they much prefer to read it in their own language. So that's sort of our approach, is that we're helping our customers create content that's localized to the folks that they're trying to reach, so they can have that personalized experience.
Yeah, and speaking about localization and global expansion, the name of this podcast is Default Global. It comes from something I heard on an A16Z podcast last year. The guys at Emerson Horowitz mentioned that the futures companies will be default global. So this idea really resonates with me, because I believe that nowadays even small companies, even like early stage startups, can become global first companies, right? So from your perspective, with this change, how have this new language tags like AI machine translation, changed the game for small to middle companies who are looking to global markets?
Absolutely. It's a huge competitive advantage, especially for smaller companies and I agree with you that I love the concept of default global. It used to be 10 years ago, 5 years ago, you could start up a company, a software company, and you'd have the time to build it up in your own company, and then you would move on to other markets. Today, I don't think you have that luxury. I think that immediately you've got a good idea and you immediately have to set your sights on going global, right, into the key markets. Otherwise, you're going to get outflanked by another company in another country that's faster than you at doing that, right? So default global is really important. And I also think it's very important from a product development perspective, from an engineering perspective, from a marketing perspective, is to be thinking global first, right? So when you build out your architecture, you've got that notion of it's going to be global, right? If you start out with thinking it's only going to be national, let's say, then now you got to go back and refactor, right? So default global makes a lot of sense to me. We also know that now with the advent of machine translation, very high quality machine translation, and coupling that with AI, that we can bring down the cost quite significantly. So whereas in the past, I think it was cost prohibitive to create a localized experiences. Now I don't think it's a material issue. I think that it's part of doing business.
And speaking about that, at this point, who's your typical ICP? Are you still mainly working with global, large organizations, or are you seeing this like increase in smaller companies like startups who are using Smartling's services?
Sure. Yeah, it's really a combination of both, right? So our the customers I name, so Apple, Disney, Tesla, IBM, et cetera, are obviously large global brands that everyone's familiar with. But the vast majority of our customers are actually I would say mid-sized, small to mid-sized technology companies that are startups, maybe Series B and later. And these are companies that are, once again, very, very much thinking about default global and expanding their market share very rapidly out of their country. And frankly, as you know, if you're in the EU area, you got to have right out of the box. You have to have multilingual solutions. So in North America, you can kind of get away with it for a little bit longer, but in the rest of the world, you really need to be global first, right out of the box.
Yeah, and like a business expansion, localization is not just about translating content, in fact, right? It's about tackling the big challenge of going global, right? Hiring local experts, understanding local cultures, dealing with different local rules, norms, regulations, right? So with smart links, like impressive international footprint, having like 150 employees across more than 10 countries, I guess, and just these five international offices. Could you share your strategy for global hiring expansion?
Sure. So, yeah, right. I think we're in 17 countries now. We have translators in hundreds of countries, and that's really the key. So the trick is it depends on the role you're trying to hire. We do try and keep our sort of product and engineering people in certain hub areas. And customer facing people are where our customers are. We try and keep them in the same area, the same region, particularly time zone, right? So those are all important. So we are a global, or we're a remote first company. So for us, we have hundreds of employees and thousands of translators all around the world. So having the right infrastructure to communicate and having a very rigorous process for hiring the right people is paramount, right? You don't have the luxury of having people in office and meeting all the time. So I think because we've been so global for so long, when the pandemic hit and everyone went remote first, we were very well situated for that because we really already were remote first.
And you touched this a bit, but still, how does Smartling decide on the locations for hiring specific roles? What criteria influence these decisions? For example, I know that you have a strong engineering team in Ukraine, right? So does that mean that like a Smartling focuses on hiring remote engineers specifically only in Ukraine, or you still have some other hubs? So basically, does Smartlink choose countries where the best talent for specific roles can be found?
Yeah, I think that hubbing up it matters, right? So you take Ukraine. We've got incredible engineering team who's largely based in Ukraine. You've got time zone, you've got language, you've got culture, you've got all these things that really make a difference. So that's a big hub for us. We also have a very strong engineering team in Europe and in North America. And so it's hard for me to say, specifically what set of talent, but we do try and hub people up, if that makes sense, from a location perspective.
Yeah, totally. But again, operating in multiple countries comes with its own, like I guess, set of challenges, right? So especially when it comes to compliance, payroll. So could you discuss how SmartLink addresses these issues? Are there specific maybe tools or platforms you rely on, or or maybe you have your own approach?
Yeah, no, documentation becomes really critically important, right? So we rely on, for example, for project management, we rely on Monday.com. We rely on Slack. A lot of the work is done asynchronously, so business requirements, specifications, wireframes have to be more paramount, have to be more important, right? And I think then also the type of engineer that you're hiring is really important, the type of developer, right? Um, so even as I say, the business requirements and wireframes, all that need to be more sophisticated. At the same time, they're never sophisticated enough. So it's important you hire an engineer that's able to sort of see around the corners a little bit more and have a really good understanding of what outcome you're really looking for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, totally, totally. So, Brian, you have really like a cool background. So you've been through like a transformative periods in the tech space, from the internet to cloud and now AI. So in the current landscape, where like a I guess like a macroeconomic like factors present challenges, but AI is booming, is growing. How do you navigate SmartLink's like a strategy to ensure growth and like a relevance in this evolving market? I guess it's like a question: what kind of tips can you give to other entrepreneurs who are in this AI, maybe just in the tech space?
Yeah, that's a great question and a tough one in a sense. And you're right. I went through the internet, I went through cloud services, and now we're in this next wave, which is really there's mobile, right, and now we're really in this next wave, which is AI, and it feels like every one of these phases is moving faster than the last, right? And it took we had the e-commerce boom and bust, and then if you think about that, it took many years to mature, right? And it's still evolving, right? But then cloud services came in, and once again took many years to evolve and mature. And then we've got AI, but AI is moving way faster than any of these others. And I think it has to do with the nature of the technology itself, right? It's constantly evolving itself, and then also with its application. It's very easily applicable, if that's a way, right? So if you think about you know the cloud, right? It took a shift from on-prem or whatever. You had to rewrite, kind of refactor things to get them to run in the cloud and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of that going on. AI can snaps in and can have a large influence on your applications in a much faster way. And so the way, I guess my advice on it would be, you got to make sure that you've got resources that are dedicated to leveraging AI inside of your business. So one of the things we did, for example, is we set up a whole function within our business that's basically AI R&D, right? And their job is to think about and discover applications for AI in our products. And then that feeds up into product and engineering. We're also very cognizant of the evolution of the LLMs themselves, right? So every week, it feels like there's a new AI engine or a new evolvement of that. And so you got to kind of pick, you got to, this is the balance. You got to pick your horses to ride, and maybe it's more than one, but it's not all, right? So you got to be carefully evaluating what are the best resources to utilize within your business. But I would say that, in a nutshell, what I would say is that you gotta allocate some resources specifically to it, to help you come up with the proper use cases, and develop the technology, and then make sure that you're cognizant of sort of what the opportunities for LLMs are out there.
Yeah, and that's very cool that you have a special team that works specifically on that. So, and maybe with that you can share some like insights, like where do you see the most impactful and useful use cases for AI, maybe beyond what we're seeing now? Do you expect anything special in maybe next 2 3 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's Gen AI, it's generative AI, right? So it's really good at producing content in effect, right? So for us specifically in translation, what it's really good at doing is taking content, right, that we've translated with machine translation, and then writing. We have multiple patents out on the prompts and the integration that we're doing to improve the quality of that translation, to measure quality, basically helping, doing things that humans were doing and making them more productive so that it can produce more. And most of our customers, they're not interested in, they're obviously interested in cost, but what they're really interested in is in output. So if they're spending $1 million a year to get, X amount of translation, they don't necessarily want to spend less than $1 million. They want to get a lot more for that, because there's really, frankly, an infinite quantity of content that could be translated, and the larger the footprint, the better. But I think that, from a perspective of leveraging AI within the business, whether it's helping to write code, whether it's creating chatbots, whether it's creating content, right, whether it's doing translation, those are the early innings sort of those are the early innings applications which are yielding big benefits. I see it evolving, and we're beginning to use it much more in analytics, right? So analyzing content that's been translated, assigning, and doing what we do language quality assessments or language quality estimation, and helping us make decisions around, is this good quality, is this poor quality, et cetera, et cetera. So it's getting smarter and smarter as we develop it more.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bryan, for sharing your insights on like a future of translation, on AI, and like Smartling's role in a global market. We're keen to see how you keep leading in this fast evolving field. So best of luck to you, to your team, and keep up the amazing work.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a lot of fun. I do feel someone asked me today. They said, "What other AI innovators are you looking at in the space?" I'm like, I'm looking at our team right now. I think they're really out front
Awesome.
doing some really remarkable work.
Awesome. Thank you very much.